Welcome back to Tonight with Jane Dutton. I'm going to take you live to the Waterkloof Air Base, where the Chinese Premier Xi Jinping has just alighted from his plane. He's got off the steps. He's there at the bottom doing the meet and greet with the press. These are ahead of the meetings with the other BRICS countries. We were talking to Minister Zulu about the sort of impact that small businesses will have. It's only been on the agenda for the last 3 years, but there's going to be a real push considering how many employers small businesses have in South Africa and the sort of impact that they have on the economy. Obviously, South Africa is the only representative on the continent of Africa in the BRICS summit. So an important player, and we'll be seeing how it'll be using its leverage there. But let's get on the day's news with Shahan.
All right, thanks so much for that, Jane. Appreciate it. Also visuals of the International Relations Minister Lindiwe Sisulu greeting the President of China, as well as Ibrahim Patel, the Economic Development Minister. And this is leading our bulletin. The BRICS Summit, which starts on Wednesday, will benefit other African countries. That's the word from International Relations Minister Lindiwe Sisulu. Heads of state from Angola and Uganda will be among those who will take part in this year's summit. This year's edition is the 10th meeting of the Group of Nations.
Would like to make sure that the rest of Africa can benefit in the same way that we are benefiting from this, especially now that Africa has begun to work out ways in which we can have free trade areas, and most of us have signed that, a great leap ahead for Africa. We would like to make sure that whatever possibilities exist in BRICS are available for the rest of Africa. We have created a special outreach so that African countries can come, and an additional special outreach to make sure that SADC countries can come in particular. We are currently chair of SADC, and most of the issues that we are dealing with in SADC, we feel are issues that they would benefit from if they had direct access to BRICS itself.
Eskom's group CEO says their priority is to stabilize the power utility. Eskom released its financial results today. It's reported a net loss of 2.3 billion rand compared to the previous year, and 19 billion rand in irregular spending since 2012.
There are green shoots that began to show, smaller things that made us realize that we're on the right trajectory. For example, despite the challenges that we had during the financial year, you began to see the improving liquidity of an institution that could not access funding for 6 months. The operational performance continued to improve, and we'll talk about that. The control system and governance improved. We're not yet where we'd like to be, but there was progress. It was only then that we then started talking about the future Eskom. What kind of Eskom do we envisage?
And police are still looking for those responsible for a mass shooting in Kalenza and KwaZulu-Natal. 11 people were shot dead and 4 others wounded in an ambush on Saturday night. The Transport Minister has condemned the violence. Department spokesperson Ishmael Nisi says they've already taken steps to deal with ongoing taxi violence.
If a crime has been committed, the police leads us in dealing with these issues. The minister, working together with the security cluster ministers, are hard at work to make sure that a crime within the taxi industry is dealt with and perpetrators are getting arrested. You might have seen that in previous weeks and incidences in the Western Cape, in Gauteng, where people have been arrested. And you also might have seen that some of the deterrents that we have as a department is to ensure that where violence continues is to close the taxi ranks where such violence is taking place, and to make sure that we deploy physical policemen to monitor the sites where such violence has been perpetrated. And we've been seeing improvements in this regard.
Those are your headlines. Details coming up on NewsHour at 10 o'clock. Jane?
Thanks very much for that, Shahan. To discuss the Zimbabwe elections further, we're joined by Tinashe Jonas, founder of Ideal Zimbabwe, a registered party to contest the elections. We have Kennedy Mandaza at the end of the table, ZANU PF spokesperson in South Africa, and Dewa Mavhinga, the Southern African director at Human Rights Watch. It's very good to have all three of you. Seeing as we kicked off that segment with allegations of voter rigging, ghost voters, and I know that you've pulled your party out because of your concerns. Let's start off with you, Mr. Jonas. Tell us what the problem is. What's going on?
Okay, the biggest problem, number one, is that Emmerson Mnangagwa is illegitimate president. He went through the fake coup when he replaced this right-hand man, Robert Mugabe. And then they pretended a coup so that Zimbabweans can have hope in ZANU PF again. So he is a legitimate president, but there was no coup. It was stage managed.
But you're having elections now.
Okay, so illegitimate president plus illegitimate government plus illegitimate electoral body is equals to illegitimate winner. So Emmerson Mnangagwa doesn't have the mandate to call for an election. That's number one. Any winner from this election is not a winner from the people. Number two, the ZEC, Zimbabwe Electoral Commission chairperson, Justice Chigumba, she's in love with a married minister of Emmerson Mnangagwa called Winston Chitando. So when, and again, she's being told what to do by the army general, who is called, General Chiwenga, who resigned from the military only to become a minister of defense and vice president. He is still in control of the army. So the elections, they are run by the army. Thirdly, the ballot boxes printing and whatsoever, everything is in mystery. And our voters' roll has been the source of sustaining ZANU PF. It has got people, 1960, to people 150 years old, 200 years old, they are on the voters' roll. And then fourthly, let's talk about the media itself. The government is controlling both the state media and the private media. 4 months ago, I declared myself a president of the republic. It never made any headlines, the story. Why? Because Mnangagwa has declared himself the president. So as a citizen of the country, I've got a right to declare myself the president. So the media in Zimbabwe is there for Mnangagwa and Chamisa.
Okay, let's get back to the media in a minute, but let's first put your point to Mr. Mandaza about these ghost voters and the fact that it's an illegitimate election with an illegitimate president. What's your response?
To start with, President Mnangagwa is a legitimate president. And when the events that took place in November last year took place, subsequent to the impeachment of Comrade Robert Mugabe, the process that ensued was constitutional, both for the country and for the party. And the party constitution dictates that if the president who is sitting, if he decides to resign, then it is the responsibility of the party from which the president was coming to choose another person to take over, which is what happened. Then, so the president who is currently sitting, who is President Emmerson Mnangagwa, is legitimate and has the mandate to make sure that he can preside what is happening in the country at the moment. And when it comes to the issues that have been raised about ghost voters and so on, that is the responsibility of the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission to make sure that they come up with a voters' roll that suits or that meets the expectations of the guidelines that are set by AU, SADC, and even the Zimbabwean constitution. So we leave it as of now in the hands of the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, which is an independent electoral body that came as a result of the constitution that came out.
But we haven't seen good results in the past, have we? I mean, what's going to be different this time?
The Zimbabwe Electoral Commission that we have is as a result of the constitution that came about in 2013. So this is the first time that we are having the current body presiding over elections. And they've been very clear, and we have seen it, that whatever they've been doing, they've come up with modalities that intends to ensure transparency. They've come up with the multi-party liaison committee in which all the parties are interacting to make sure that the concerns that they raise, they can discuss them, bring them to the attention of ZEC, and by consensus, some of these issues can be attended to. And this is what has been happening so far.
Okay, from a Human Rights Watch point of view, where are we with these elections? Are these legitimate elections? And if they are, Is everything in place in order to make sure that they are free and fair? And how do you respond to those allegations that already we've seen ghost voters?
Yes, what we have is that after the military coup in November 2017, we are now going towards elections under the management of the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission. It has not shown itself to be truly independent and impartial, so there are huge concerns there. President Mnangagwa has repeatedly said this election will be free and fair, and he has done well to open it up to international observers. So we have seen SADC, the African Union, the European Union, Commonwealth, and others coming into Zimbabwe, 46 foreign countries. That is positive. There is less open violence, but concerns are to do with continuing intimidation, particularly by ZANU PF officials in rural areas, and the deployment of soldiers in some rural areas.
And they are intimidating the observers at work there, or
intimidating voters.
As they have done in the past.
Yes, as has been. So there is that huge concern, and particularly that if the election, as some polls are indicating, does not have a clear winner in the first round of elections, and we have to go for a presidential runoff election on 8 September this year, that might actually open up for violence, because then it means that tensions will be high, and there is huge uncertainty within ZANU PF supporters, within the state security forces. We have become openly partisan and highly politicized following the military coup. So there are huge concerns, and the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission has not shown itself to be independent. There are questions of conflict of interest around the chairperson of the Electoral Commission, Justice Chigumba, given points raised by Jonas here. So all those issues come to bear in terms of issues of transparency and accountability, and we are pushing to say there is need for this election to be truly credible, because Mnangagwa does have questions of legitimacy, because he has come in not through an election, but through a military coup, and now needs to have this election to bestow legitimacy.
Basically, everything you said has been turned upside down, but I want you to deal with the allegations of voter intimidation that we are already seeing by ZANU PF members, which we've seen in the past. I mean, how come this is not something that is being stopped? If Mnangagwa is to present a new vision for Zimbabwe, how come he can't deal with this? And how come he can't deal with the clear voter irregularities that we are already seeing?
Let me start with the clear voter irregularities that have been raised.
I mean, Human Rights Watch is there saying that there's a lack of transparency. Yeah.
Let me start from we don't, from the ZANU PF perspective, we don't seek to defend the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission and any of the appointees or any of the commissioners that are there. But at times it becomes necessary for us to dispel some of the myths and misconceptions that surrounds the issues that are raised. For instance, when we come to the relationship that is coming in the fore right now, which is made to taint the image of the chairperson of the commission, I think one of the things that we need to look at, other than the relationship, if it exists, which has to be tested and it has to be proven whether it exists, has the chairperson of the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission failed to live up to the expectations of her responsibilities. And we understand that when the chairperson and the other commissioners were brought into ZEC, one of the people who took part in interviewing them was the current president of the MDC, which is Nelson Chamisa. And it was very clear to say that Justice Chigumba has the integrity, and she can carry the mandate that she has been given. And we are hoping that she is doing that, and we have been able to see that. Then we see the issues that have been raised of intimidation. I was on the ground for quite some time. There are issues that people are saying the soldiers have been deployed in the countryside, in the villages, and so on. For a start, I have not seen them. Whilst people can talk about fights or violence, the violence that have been taking place, if ever they are there, they cannot be given to ZANU PF. Or
Human rights groups say.
Yes, that's what they are saying, because they have proven also to a certain point to be partisan. They have proven also to side with the opposition. And as a result, anything that happens, for example, we have a group of people that are referred to as the vanguard, which is the youth of MDC. These have been terrorizing people in towns and also in the rural areas, and nobody speaks about them.
Okay, very quickly, because we're going to have to wrap this up. Have you heard confirmation of that as well? Very quickly.
Yes, we have had confirmation of incidents of violence, not only in the ruling party ZANU PF, but also in opposition parties. And we have recorded that and called on political parties, all of them, to act responsibly and restrain their members. And the police are investigating all these cases. But certainly we have documented evidence of intimidation widespread across rural communities, and also recorded cases of intimidation and violence that we have.
Here we go again, isn't it, Mr. Jonas, Mr. Mavhinga, and Mr. Mandaza? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I appreciate your time. Trump, Tehran, and Twitter, why Iran is back in the US president's crosshairs. Tonight, we head to Washington for the latest, and we'll be right back for that.